There is a quiet, incredibly lucrative financial revolution happening right underneath your nose, and you are currently losing. Over the last decade, corporate America realized that selling you a physical product was a fundamentally flawed business model. Why would they ever sell you something once, when they could financially shackle you to a monthly payment forever? You have been slowly, systematically downgraded from a consumer who owns actual assets to a permanent tenant in your own life. My name is Nick, and today we are breaking down the absolute mathematical nightmare of the modern subscription economy. We are going to expose how these invisible micropayments are quietly draining the middle class of their ability to build wealth. Hit subscribe if you prefer the brutal mathematical truth over slick corporate marketing, and let's get into the actual numbers. The mainstream narrative around the subscription model is consistently framed as the ultimate, undeniable victory of modern convenience. You no longer have to save up $1,000 to buy the software, the hardware, or the premium service. You just pay a frictionless $15 a month, and the psychological pain of the checkout counter disappears entirely. It feels like a massive democratization of access, allowing everyone to live like literal royalty on a middle-class budget. You get your movies, your music, your razor blades, and your prepared meals delivered directly to your front door. But this convenience is a highly engineered, mathematically flawless trap designed to extract maximum lifetime value from your stagnant wages. Let's drop the numbers that absolutely ruin the vibe of this frictionless, cancel, anytime, venture, capital-funded corporate utopia. According to a recent financial survey, the average American estimates they spend about $86 a month on various subscriptions. But when researchers actually audited their bank statements, the real number was a staggering $273. Let that sink in for a second, because you are bleeding over $3,200 a single year. That is $3,000 in recurring payments that you barely even register, automatically siphoned from your checking account every month. The global subscription market was valued at roughly $275 billion just a few short years ago. Today financial analysts project that exact same market will explode to $1.5 trillion by the year 2025. That is not normal economic growth. That is a vertical, parabolic launch into the stratosphere fueled by your behavioral inertia. And that staggering number is strictly for digital services, entertainment, and software, completely ignoring the massive physical hardware shift. Wall Street decided years ago that single, one-off purchases are essentially a toxic asset class in the modern stock market. A company that sells a software program for $200 gets a completely mediocre valuation from institutional investors. But a company that charges $20 a month for that exact same software receives a massive inflated revenue multiple. Wall Street analysts use a metric called the price-to-sales ratio to judge whether a company is actually worth investing in. A traditional hardware company that builds a physical item and sells it once might trade at 2 times its annual revenue. But a software company that locks you into a recurring subscription can easily trade at 15 or 20 times its annual revenue. The stock market is directly incentivizing CEOs to destroy the concept of ownership, because it physically makes them richer overnight. Which brings us to the actual predatory mechanism of the trap, known in corporate boardrooms as customer lifetime value. When you buy a product outright, the transaction ends, and the company has to actually earn your future repeat business. They have to innovate, they have to improve, and they have to convince you to open your wallet all over again. But when you subscribe, the default state of your bank account becomes a permanent, slow drip wealth transfer to their shareholders. They rely entirely on a psychological concept called friction asymmetry, where signing up takes literally 3 seconds and a thumbprint. But canceling requires navigating a labyrinth of hidden menus, customer retention phone calls, and highly manipulative emotional guilt trips. They know that human beings are fundamentally lazy, meaning you will pay for months out of sheer, unadulterated behavioral inertia. The entire business model is predicated on the statistical certainty that you will eventually forget you are even paying them. Let's meet Sarah, a prime example of the modern consumer, who feels incredibly broke despite earning $90,000 a year. Sarah considers herself financially responsible because she has no credit card debt, and she dutifully funds her basic retirement account. But Sarah subscribes to 3 streaming platforms, 2 fitness apps, a meal delivery kit, and a premium digital dating service. She doesn't actually own her phone. She pays a monthly lease fee to her carrier, so she can upgrade annually. She subscribes to her car via lease, and she pays $14 a month just to use her heated seats. Yes, automotive companies are now putting physical hardware in your car and forcing you to rent the functionality via software. Then she bought a $20,000 exercise bike that completely bricks itself if she stops paying the $40 monthly subscription fee. Sarah drops roughly $800 a month on things she will literally never possess a single ounce of equity in. Over a 10-year period, that is $96,000 of capital, entirely vaporized into the ether of corporate profit margins. If she had invested that exact same monthly amount into a basic S&P 500 index fund, the math changes drastically. Earning an 8% historical return, she would have over $140,000 sitting in a brokerage account. Instead, she has a perfectly curated digital existence and absolutely nothing of tangible, lasting value to show for her daily labor. Which brings us back to the mechanism, but this time, we need to contrast her with someone who actually understands the math. Meet Dave, a guy who makes the exact same $90,000 a year, but absolutely refuses to rent his lifestyle. Dave drives a 7-year-old car that he bought in cash, meaning his automotive software doesn't randomly demand a monthly premium. He buys his software with a one-time perpetual license. He owns a physical media collection, and he works out with heavy iron. When inflation spiked to 9% last year, Sarah's entire cost of living skyrocketed because her subscriptions all raised their monthly prices. They sent her an incredibly polite email explaining that due to macroeconomic conditions, her fitness app now costs $30 a month. But Dave didn't care about the inflation print because his cast iron kettlebells and his perpetual software licenses don't adjust for the CPI. Dave's overhead is fixed, meaning that when he gets a 3% raise at work, that money goes directly into his savings. When Sarah gets a raise, it is immediately absorbed by the silent, creeping inflation of 20 different Silicon Valley billing departments. It is the ultimate invisible tax on the working class, a death by 1,000 paper cuts that leaves you financially paralyzed. You are effectively mowing your lawn with nail clippers, wondering why you are sweating so much, and making absolutely zero forward progress. If you are feeling a creeping sense of historical déjà vu right now, you are definitely not alone in this realization. History doesn't always repeat itself perfectly, but it definitely rhymes, and we have absolutely danced to this specific song before. In the late 19th century, massive industrial monopolies created the infamous company town, where workers were paid in restricted company script. You rented your house from the company, you bought overpriced groceries at the company store, and you leased your basic tools. The entire ecosystem was meticulously, mathematically balanced so that the exhausted worker could never actually afford to leave the company town. We have essentially digitized that exact same feudal concept, removed the physical town, and installed it directly onto your modern smartphone. We are rapidly turning into a society of digital sharecroppers, constantly renting the basic tools required to exist in the modern world. It is a brilliant feedback loop that is incredibly beautiful for corporate earnings, right up until the consumer finally goes completely bankrupt. And it gets worse, because this model is aggressively expanding into the actual physical appliances sitting inside of your own home. Printer companies are literally blocking you from scanning your own documents if you cancel your required monthly ink subscription service. Appliance manufacturers are designing luxury refrigerators that require a Wi-Fi connection and a monthly fee just to dispense extra ice. You are paying a 30-year mortgage to live in a house filled with items that can be deactivated remotely by a server. This isn't normal capitalism. This is a highly orchestrated siege on the basic concept of private ownership for the American middle class. So, what does this actually mean for you? And how do you realistically protect your wallet from this relentless corporate extraction? Because if you don't take immediate action, you will literally subscribe yourself into a permanent state of financial mediocrity and severe stress. Here are 4 practical, mathematically sound takeaways to stop the bleeding and regain actual control over your personal monthly cash flow. First, perform a ruthless, unapologetic audit of your credit card and bank statements this weekend, and cancel absolutely everything immediately. If you haven't actively used a digital service in the last 30 days, you do not need it. So cut the cord. Second, adopt a strict, uncompromising policy of buying physical hardware and software outright whenever the option is mathematically available to you. Third, utilize virtual credit cards with strict spending limits for any online service, forcing them to ask permission before they auto-renew. Fourth, calculate the annualized cost of every single $10 monthly fee before you ever authenticate that impulse purchase with your Face ID. Because $10 a month isn't just $10. It is $120 a year stolen from your future. Now, here is the uncomfortable truth about the entire subscription economy that nobody on Wall Street actually wants to admit out loud. Ownership is rapidly becoming an exclusive, highly guarded luxury reserved strictly for the wealthy, while the middle class is forced to rent. When you own absolutely nothing, your entire income is completely vulnerable to algorithmic price hikes and arbitrary corporate policy changes. You cannot pass a digital subscription down to your children, and you cannot borrow against a software license during a financial emergency. Eventually, market gravity always returns, and the mathematical reality of renting your entire life will inevitably crush your long-term retirement savings. The system is banking heavily on the assumption that you are simply too distracted and too tired to ever do the math. Do you think this entire situation ends in a regulatory crackdown, where the government finally mandates transparent, one-click cancellation buttons? Or B, a dystopian technological future, where you literally have to subscribe to your refrigerator just to keep your groceries perfectly cold? Or C, a quiet breaking point where exhausted, financially drained consumers simply revert to buying physical goods and abandon the apps entirely? Drop your take in the comments below, because I genuinely want to hear exactly where you land on this absolute financial mess. Take back your cash flow, stop blindly renting your existence from tech billionaires, and I will see you in the next one.